So we can simply on one line create our PHP starting and ending tag, and we can put a check in here. So you might be confused by this, but I'm going to say if something and then brackets. So if is set we can say full name, echo full name. So essentially what we're doing is we're doing all on one line that we would usually break up with line breaks in PHP. So all we're doing is checking if this full name value is set, and if it is, we're echoing the full name. Otherwise we're not doing anything. We don't need to include an else in this case. So let's go ahead and just echo this out again, and I can show you how that has changed our form. So I'm going to type Alex Garrett and click submit, and you can see that now this value has remained in our form. So this sort of type of practice is useful for when you're a user maybe filling out long registration forms. You don't want them to have to keep typing in the data every time you refresh your page, or they click the submit button and the page is refreshed. So now that we've got that covered, we can actually go on to splitting the name. So we've got our full name, but now we want to include our explode function to actually split the name up. Now the name consists of Alex and then a space and then Garrett, or whatever it may be. If we would say Alex James Garrett, we've got two spaces in there, therefore we have three elements, Alex, James and Garrett. So we want to check for this a bit later on in the program. The first thing I'm going to do is trim our full name. This takes away white space from the left and the right hand side of whatever we type in, and I guess this just allows for additional spaces not to be counted. Okay, so now that we've got our full name trimmed and ready to use, we can now actually trim our name. Well, not trim, but explode. Now explode takes into account a variable, and you use a specific character that you want to explode by. So if you don't understand, I'm going to go ahead and write the code and you can make it up for yourself. So I'm going to create a new variable called names, and this is going to be equal to explode. Now explode is going to take two parameters. The first one is going to be the character that you want to split it by, and in this case it's a space. So I've just essentially created a space in between these two single quotation marks. The next is the value that you want to explode, and in this case it's full name. So now what we've done is we've actually created an array. Names is now an array, and each element of the array is that separated by a space. So we can test this down here by saying echo names 0, and what this will do is it will return the first element of the array. 1 will return the second element, and so on and so forth. But we want to focus on 0 and 1, and we don't want the user to type a middle name. So let's just test this by echoing out the first element. Now in this case, if I was to type in my name as Alex Garrett, the first element, you've probably guessed, would be Alex. So let's click submit, and you can see that just Alex has been returned. So we've actually split this space here. There's a space in here that I've highlighted in blue, and we've taken this first element. This would be the second element. So let's go ahead and test that to see what happens. And click submit, and you can see that we're returned with Garrett. So now essentially we've done what the tutorial covers. However, I'm going to go into a bit more depth, and we're going to check if we have a first, middle or surname, or you could have 5 names in your name. So we need to check this. Now to do this, I'm going to create a new variable up here called errors, and that's going to equal to an array. I'm going to create an array of errors that may occur in our program, which we can later on relay to the user. So for example, if they don't type a name, or they type more than 2 names. So the first check that we need to do is we need to make sure that this full name here actually consists of some text. So we can say if empty full name is going to check if it is equal to null, so if it actually contains anything at all. Then what we can do is we can say errors, remember these square brackets because we're adding an element to this errors array, and that's going to equal please enter a name. Okay, so if it's empty, we're going to say please enter empty and please enter a name. We're not echoing this text out, but what we're doing is later on we're going to create a loop that's going to tell us the errors in our program. So down here what we can do is do another check whether we have more than 2 names in our array. So I'm going to say if count, this counts the elements of our array, and our array is obviously names now. So count names is greater than 2, or count names is equal to 1, we're going to create another element of this errors array and say please enter your first and last name. In fact, what we could do is we could incorporate this empty into here. So let's just get rid of that, and we could say or empty full name. So essentially what we're doing here is we're first checking if we have more than 2 names inserted, and that's going to return this error, please enter your first and last name. If we have the name equal to 1, so the elements in this exploded value equal to 1, then we're also going to say please enter your first and last name, because they've only would have entered 1 name. Or if the whole full name is empty, we're going to relay the same message. So now what we can do is we can check if this errors array contains anything, and if it does contain anything, it would have mean that this condition here has been returned as false. So if empty errors, we can continue with our program, and that's fine. Otherwise, we need to echo out the errors that we have accrued during the registration process. And the reason I've done this is because you can add to this type of functionality, and you may want to come down here and then say if telephone, or let's say if empty telephone, depending on how many fields you have in your registration. So it's quite simple to just add more fields into your form and then incorporate this same thing with each check. So otherwise we want to say for each errors as error echo error, and then we're going to append a break onto the end of that. So let me just explain this code that I've written here, and you'll probably get to grips with it. So for each errors as error, essentially what this is doing is it's taking the whole array of errors, and we're accessing each individual element which we've now named error. So we've checked if errors has something in. If it doesn't, that's fine. If it's empty, we haven't accrued any errors. Otherwise, for every error, as this new variable just called error, echo out the error. So in here, let's go ahead and echo out OK, and then we'll know if we're typing in the right thing, and then we can go ahead with the rest of our program. So if I was to type nothing and click submit, please enter your first and last name. This is taken from this part here, if empty full name. Let's just type my first name and click submit. Please enter your first and last name. We're getting the same error message up. This is from this part here. If we were to type Alex James Garrett, which is my full name, and click submit, we have the same error message. Please enter your first and last name, which is this here, because the count of names is 3, and that is greater than 2, so we've accrued this error. Okay, so that's done. Now we can go ahead and just simply output our first and last name. What you'd like to do, what you should really do, is create new variables for this. So first name equals names 0. Last name equals names 1. So this is the first element, this is the second element. In the case that I was to type just Alex Garrett, this would be the first element, and this would be the second element. So that's 0, because we always start at 0, and 1. So that's simple. Now we can come down here and we can echo out a string of data and just display it to our user, and then we're done. You don't actually need to do this in a registration purpose, we're just doing it for sort of example. But first name and last name can then be input into your database if you're using this for registration purposes. So I'm going to say first name, and then I'm going to append on with a full stop, first name. I'm going to append on a break, and then I'm going to say last name, and then I'm going to click, I'm going to append on again, last name, and we're done. So now let's go ahead and test the complete functionality of our program, and I just type Alex, Garrett. We've already been through the errors, so this now should ensure that the errors array is empty. We take first name and last name from our names array, which we exploded, and then we just echo them out. So let's go ahead and click submit, and you can see that we've achieved first name Alex and last name Garrett.